Good morning, friends. Welcome to Tuesday morning of our online webinar retreat. We're so excited that you're with us. I want to take the next 5 minutes to encourage you with something from God's Word. Yesterday, I talked to you about the fact that you are enough. You are enough for the role that God has created for you to fill. We get into trouble sometimes when we try to do more than our role or try to accept something that really isn't ours to accept. So embracing enough, embrace the role that God has given you, and you are enough, except with this caveat. None of us are enough without God. We are enough because God is with us. And if you are God's child, I want you to listen to these verses that really struck me the other day. And so I'm excited to share them with you. This is from Psalm 89. And here's my emphasis today, okay? His strength is enough. His strength is enough. So let me read this passage and then we'll talk about it a little bit, okay? Psalm 89. Let's start at verse 14. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Love and faithfulness go before you. Blessed are those who have learned to acclaim you, who walk in the light of your presence, O Lord. They rejoice in your name all day long. They exult in your righteousness, for you are their glory and strength. Another version I have says, for you are their magnificent strength. Who are these people that can call God their magnificent strength? Well, they're the people from verse 15 and 16, the people who have learned to acclaim him, who have learned to walk in the light of his presence, who rejoice in his name all day long and exult in his righteousness. The only people who can exult in God's righteousness, the only people who walk in his ways are those who are following him, who have a relationship with Jesus. And if we have a relationship with God, if we are his children, this verse says, verse 17, that you, God, you are their glory and strength. You are their magnificent strength. When I was a young mom, and for those of you who don't know me, I have 5 children. Now, 4 of them are out of my home, and I still have 1 at home that I'm actively schooling. But let me jump back to when I was a young mom with 4 little people around me, and then that 5th one came along several years later. There were so many days when I felt very depleted. I could not go on. I was convinced. I was so tired. And I felt at the end of myself and felt very weak. And I know that in those times, I was not looking to the Lord and his strength. I was trying to do it on my own. It is so easy to forget that it is God's strength that is enough. It is not our own. And he promises strength to those who wait on him. Those who wait on him. That imagery even is like a server at a table who's waiting on you. What are they doing? They're waiting on you. They're standing there waiting for you to say, could you please bring me my drink? Could you please bring me my meal? And then they go to bring it. And that is how we should be with God. What is it that you have for me to do? Whatever that is, his strength is enough for that. Let me read to you some probably familiar verses from Psalm chapter 40. but I hope that they're an encouragement to you this morning. They surely are an encouragement to me. When my strength is all but gone, listen to Isaiah in chapter 40, verse 28 through 31. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the whole earth. He never becomes faint or weary. There is no limit to his understanding. He gives strength to the faint. Is that you? He gives strength to the faint and strengthens the powerless. Youths may become faint and weary, and young men stumble and fall, but those who trust in the Lord, not themselves, not some other person, not that their day is going to be perfect, not their money, those who trust in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not become weary. They will walk and not faint. God's strength is enough for us. Do you believe that? Do you take time? And it doesn't have to be an hour, right? Most of us do not have an hour, ladies, not when we're caring for young children. In the middle of that busyness, though, is there a moment before you get going? Maybe it's while you're brushing your teeth. Maybe it's just before you put your feet on the floor. Do you have a moment to say, God, I'm waiting on you today. I have no strength. I need your strength. And I am looking to you. And I am trusting you. And because of my relationship with Jesus, you are my magnificent strength. Your strength is enough for me. Please, God, I need you today. Let me encourage you. His strength is enough. Your strength is not. My strength is not. But his is. And he promises it to us. And I want to pray with you this morning. God, thank you for these precious women who are tuning into this retreat this week. God, your strength is enough. And when we feel depleted, will you remind us that because of Jesus, we can have a relationship with you, we can walk in the light of your presence, and you will be our magnificent strength. That as we wait on you, you will renew us. God, you will give us the strength we need to be patient with our children today. You will give us the strength we need to truly love them. You will give us the strength to be joyful when we feel anything but joyful. You will be the strength we need to be kind and compassionate like you are. Please, God, we look to you this morning for strength. In your name, I pray. Amen. We'll see you tomorrow morning.
Welcome back to day 2 of our Homeschool Choices Made Easy event. If you missed yesterday's session, don't forget to go back and check that out. That's where we started. But of course, you're welcome to jump right in with us today. We are recording this session and all the sessions in this event. So if you miss any of them or you want to come back and review information, feel free to do so. Also, don't forget to check out that link in the comments, which is where your free downloadable worksheet is. This is going to help you work through your own homeschool decisions. So as you're joining us in the event and getting tips and suggestions that might work for you, sometimes it's easier to put pen to paper. And so that's why we created that for you. You can print off as many copies as you want and continue to use that throughout your homeschool journey. Right now, I'm being joined by Lisa and Sheila. So we're going to start with some introductions before we dive in. Lisa, I'll let you go first. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you?
Sure. I'm Lisa. I am the mom of 3 kids. I homeschooled 2 of them from kindergarten through their high school graduation, all with Sonlight. One is married, and I have 2 grandchildren with from her. And then my other daughter is getting ready to start her senior year last semester of college. So she's almost done with school and ready to do grown up things, whatever that may be.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Sheila, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. I have three kids that I homeschooled from kindergarten all the way through. The oldest one did go to a private high school, but the other two went all the way through, and they are all out working in the world now.
All right. So yesterday we talked all about clarifying what your goals are or what decisions you need to make. Oftentimes, deciding to homeschool is the first big decision, but then what's next? And so we walked you through that in day one. Now we're going to get into more how do you start putting those decisions into practice? And so it's really helpful to figure out what matters to you the most. What are your priorities in those decisions? And then also setting deadlines or time limits so that you're not just saying one day I'd like to, or I wish that this would happen, but it doesn't actually start because you don't have an end date in mind. So let's start with that time limit, deadline. These can be helpful in all sorts of decisions, but ladies, let's apply it to homeschooling. If you are making choices, maybe about what curriculum to use, or maybe you want to try something different for math. Maybe your child's been using one program, it's just not working, and you want to try something different. Or you're not sure what level they should be in. How do you use deadlines or timers maybe to make it a little easier or to decide, is this working? Is it not? How long should I stick with it?
I think it's super easy to get frustrated right at the beginning of anything, and it doesn't matter what it is. It's if you're learning, sometimes that's hard and it can cause frustration. So, in your example of a math program, I would definitely say that if you're making a switch like that, or if you're evaluating whether a program is working or not, there needs to be some time invested because we have good days and we have bad days, and things are easy and things are hard. So I would say you need to give a math program a good 60 days before you kick it to the curb. But I think you need to have the freedom that at the end of your time period that you've set, that if there's more bad days than good days, that you can just have the freedom to say, this wasn't a good choice and I need to reevaluate.
Yeah, I would say 60 days would be the minimum. I would even push it to 90 days. But then after that, if there are tears every day about that particular subject, then it's probably not the subject. It's probably what you're using to teach that subject. And so don't feel like you have to use the whole thing because I put the money in. If it isn't working, it isn't working. So to make a mid-course correction is absolutely the way to go. But like Lisa said, there's a learning curve to everything. So don't feel like in the first 6 weeks, you're like, gosh, I'm just not loving it. Well, a lot of times, especially with math, the first few weeks is just review. And so I would say if the review is too hard, then perhaps the level is too hard. The review part should be easy because they're reviewing stuff that they've already mastered. If they haven't mastered it, then it may be that it's just the level that is too hard. And you may need to do, if you haven't done a placement test, you may need to go back and try a placement test and see if the placement test helps you determine, oh, yes, I do need a different level. I think a lot of times, especially when people are pulling kids out of school, they had a second grader, they now have a third grader, so they just grab the third grade stuff off the shelf and think that that's going to fit. It doesn't always fit. It's like a pair of jeans. Have you shopped for a pair of jeans and in one store you're a size 8 and another store you're in size 10 and at a third store you're a size 2? So, you just don't know until you've tried it. But then if it doesn't work, then it's absolutely the right thing to do to make a change.
Absolutely. Yeah. You both mentioned if it's hard, kind of the getting over the hurdle, the growing pains of that. But what about for a student maybe that is moving faster? Maybe it's a little easy. What would you say to somebody who's like, oh, it's a little easy. Do I keep them at, one lesson a day or whatever the instructor's guide says in a subject for today? Do I keep them moving slowly? Can I move them faster? How do you really determine how fast is too fast for that student?
I would say, actually, I had a situation like this. Sonlight used to carry a math program that they quit carrying. I think that math went out of business or it got bought out, or I don't know. It was a long time ago. And so I needed to make a change because that math was no longer available. And so I switched from that math to Singapore math. And I had my son take the placement test, and he was going into second grade. So he placed at 1B. So for that year, I actually bought 3 semesters worth. I bought 1B, 2A, and 2B. And so at the beginning of 1B, it was pretty easy because a lot of it was review. And so I let my son do 2 lessons a day. Like if he was having fun with it, I let him do more. And as long as, I literally just let him do it. Like, okay, go do your math. And he knew what to do. So he did the math. Then when he got to the point where he's like, I don't know what this is, that's when I was like, okay, now we've hit the new material and we can slow it back down. So that particular year, we ended up covering 3 different semesters worth of stuff because the first half was mostly review, but probably 3/4 of the way through the book, maybe halfway through the book, we did hit some new stuff. So it wasn't a waste of time. I also learned the Singapore method, which is a little different than what I was used to. So it was a good thing for us to start there. Start where it's comfortable, start where it's easy, and then you can pick up speed. It's always easier to do that than to put the brakes on and slow things down when there are tears and it's hard and, it's taking forever. So I would say to kind of let your child be the judge. If he wants to do 2 lessons a day, sometimes 3 lessons a day, but then you can slow things down when you've caught up to the right place, where the child is at their ability level. And then once you're there, sometimes, my boys did do, and actually all three of my kids did do rather well with math. And so we didn't have a lot of resistance. But they're, toys are toys, and they call you from the corner of the room, and they would much rather be playing than doing their math. So occasionally I would use a timer, and I would say, look, if you can get your math done in 20 minutes, then you can go play with your Legos for 10, because you have a 30-minute window for math. So the faster you get it done correctly, then you can use the rest of that time to play. And then we're going to move to the couch and do our history. So I would, flip flop between table and couch subjects. And for the boys, it worked really well. They're competitive. They would want to race the clock. They wanted to be done. They wanted to play. But for my daughter, that would stress her out. She would panic and, oh, mommy, I'm not done. The clock is going to go, and she just hated that. So that did not work for her. We had to find a different technique to get her to want to stay on task and finish. But usually just doing the thing worked. But we all have good and bad days.
But I just think that not everything in school has to be hard. We can learn if material is new, even if it's presented in an easier format. I say that a lot to people who say, well, my child can read at a 7th grade level, even though they're in 2nd grade. Well, that's great. But there's some value still to doing 2nd grade reading in that moment. So if something is too easy and no one is finding any value, well, then sure, it's time to scrap it. But not everything has to be hard to be of value. Because a lot of times another thing is hard. If I'm doing easy reading, math might be super hard for me. And there is no need to stress your brain at every single moment. Like, learning should not always be a challenge. It should be enjoyable. That's how we create lifelong learners. If everything is hard, all of school, you just can't wait to be done with school and you never have to learn again. I don't ever want to read another book. I don't ever want to discover anything new. And that is not what I wanted for my children. I wanted them to see learning as a pleasure and something to be pursued, even if it's just for the sake of learning. So easy is good in some situations.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great point. What I caught from both of you is really pay attention to your child and how are they responding to what you're doing. Sheila, you mentioned your son was having fun with math. So of course, keep moving along. It's fun. But then too, like you said, Lisa, if it's hard, that can be very overwhelming, especially to a young child who's not used to sitting and focusing on whatever work it is, whether it's reading or math or writing or any of those subjects that can be harder, especially in young children. So yeah, I absolutely agree with both of you that you need to keep an eye on your student and see how are they responding to this. Is it fun? Are they enjoying learning? Are they engaging with you? When maybe you read a book, what was this about? You can tell very quickly if that child is engaged by the way they respond to you. I mean, I've definitely had the days where my kids are, oh, well, this happened, blah, 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 and they're all excited. And then the days where they sit there and they're like, I don't know, when they start to check out, that's your sign that, okay, maybe we need to step back a little bit. So I like to, in my homeschool, if it's a longer term goal, I'll say by the end of the school year, this is what we want to accomplish. However, that does not mean that we have to accomplish everything exactly one way or it has to be perfect, or give yourself the entire calendar year because you get to decide when your school year is. I think sometimes we're locked into, oh, the school's near me, go to school these months. And so my child needs to be done with their entire HBL or their science program, their language arts, the same time that school is done. But you have flexibility that the schools do not have. So feel free to take all year and take more breaks throughout the year. A lot of people have found year-round homeschooling is super helpful for that. It makes it more relaxed and less overwhelming. However, some people like a nice big break. So kind of look at your family and see what's going on there. Sheila, you also talked about the timers, how that was super motivating for your boys, but for your daughter, not so much. And so I think that is something to play around with as well. My son also loves the timer. I started doing that to keep him on task because he could sit and stare at the wall for hours on end and not do anything. And so I found that I was like, what are you doing? Are you doing your math still? Are you reading your book? Are you, like I was checking in with him constantly. And then I was like, let's see how much you can get done in 10 minutes. It wasn't, we have to finish this assignment. Let's just see how much you can get done. And as soon as he was racing that timer, he not only stayed on task, he got done much faster, was doing it well. So I could tell he was learning, but it kept him on task. So now I find him setting his own timers for things that he wants to do on his own. So try that with your student. But again, if it's something that would be very stressful for them, maybe say, okay, we're just going to work for 10 minutes. There's no pressure to finish this assignment. We'll come back to it later. And we're just going to see how much we can get done in those 10 minutes. Sometimes that is very helpful as well. So let's talk about what are your priorities when you're making these decisions, and identifying what matters most to you. So is it, I know when I first started homeschooling, I was really focused on the academic piece of it, right? Because I felt like, oh, I need to teach my kids all these things and I need to make sure that we do every subject and we do it well and we, do all these things. And I started homeschooling in preschool. So obviously academics are not as important at that age. Playing is important, learning is fun, all of those things. It should be, right? And so I've learned to kind of ease back a little bit and refocus my priorities a bit. But what are some things maybe that you should be looking for, or maybe you haven't thought about if you're new to homeschooling, or if you're struggling with a student, you're getting kind of that behavior where they're acting out. What should you be looking at, maybe shifting priorities a little bit or shifting what matters to you?
I think it's so important to get to the heart of whatever that issue is if a student is pushing back. One of my mentors told me early on when I was, type A, have to check every box and am I doing enough, is that facts are easily available in our world. I mean, and even now more than when I had little kids, you can find out anything in your pocket. And if it's a fact that you're stressed out about, I would not stress out about that because grown-ups who have a job, who have a degree, who have experience still look things up. We cannot keep all the things in our brain. But what my children could not look up on the internet was a relationship with one another, with us as their parents, with their peers. They couldn't look up learning to love Jesus. So those quickly shifted to my priorities. And I like to say that people homeschool for lots and lots and lots of reasons. But for us, our our desire was that our children became what God had them to be. And if that meant foregoing memorizing the order of the United States presidents for wanting to serve your family, make your sister's bed one day when she's not looking, then to me, that was a priority over being a parrot of facts, because facts are easily found.
I think what comes to my mind is focusing on the 3 R's, those skill-based subjects, reading, writing, and arithmetic, because like Lisa said, you can look up what year or what day the Civil War started, or, those kinds of facts. But if you can't read that information, then it's not going to do you any good. So you need to be able to read, you need to be able to do some math, and you need to be able to write, because even in this digital age, we still create written content. It just may not be handwritten like it used to be, although a lot of it still is. But you need to be able to communicate clearly and use correct syntax and grammar and things like that. So, especially in the early years, if you are struggling in one of those areas, I would focus on those things first. And if you need to set aside for a time things like history and science and those non-skill based subjects that you can make up, because you're not going to learn all of world history when you're in kindergarten. You will get it again. It's going to cycle back around. But if you can't read in 7th grade, that's an issue. So I think, when you name what matters in your homeschool, and things like character traits and everything, of course, is part of it. But those skill-based subjects are the ones that you want to major in, and then you can minor in the non-skill-based subjects. Because if your kids get a passion for world history, they're going to look up all the information, or a world war or whatever it is. But again, they need to have the skills, and that's your job, is to make sure that they have those skills.
Yeah. So how would you suggest, because I love what you were saying there, like letting them, you mentioned kind of that rabbit trail that kids will go on once they've learned how to read and write, or Lisa, you were talking about the relationships with your students. How do you know if you're doing enough? I know we've talked about in several of these sessions, like you don't have to do every single thing that comes in your Sonlight program. Sonlight is so rich, so full, that even if you are not doing every single thing, your students are still learning, and they are still progressing. You will see that. But how do you know, like, okay, my student really hates to write. How do you know if you're doing enough, or, so that they are going to learn those skills? Or my student is struggling to read. When is it a problem, or when is it just a normal developmental, they're not quite there yet? Like, how do you figure that out?
The most important thing about determining, am I doing enough? Is this a real problem? Those kinds of questions. I don't think there's a hard and fast answer to that, but I think you're the mom. And with your husband, I think you will know if this is a problem or this is a behavior. Or I just feel like God gave you these kids for a reason, and he also equipped you for these kids. So I think part of that is going to vary between my child that can't read at 7 and your child that can't read at 7. Your child is, just taking a little longer, and my child has severe dyslexia and we need to get intervention. I think that's a case by case kind of thing. But as far as, are you doing enough? I think once you've established what's really important to you, and I completely agree with what Sheila said, you have to know how to read, you have to know how to do these things. But as you look at the child and how they are uniquely made and gifted, what's enough, again, for my child in 7th grade is not enough for your child in 7th grade. And so I think it's so important to keep in mind that even if you have 12 children, enough for each one of them is not the same either. So look at your child and really think about where God has gifted them and where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are and how you can be the best preparer of that child for whatever lies ahead for them, while making sure that they are going to be functioning adults. We want literate reading, math, all of those things, and then I think you'll know. I think it's hard to quantify in a 5-minute soundbite or a 30-second soundbite or whatever that is. It's hard to quantify, but I think if you're loving your child, you'll know.
So when I first started homeschooling, I was afraid that I wasn't going to do enough or I was going to do too much. So I started with a curriculum. I started with Sonlight because I wanted to have a skeleton framework that I would know this is enough in one day, in one subject or whatever. And then as I became more comfortable homeschooling and getting to know my kids and their learning styles and their abilities and their skills and all of those things, then I learned how to tweak. I didn't have to do it exactly as it was written. I could ask my own questions. I didn't have to ask every question that was in the instructor's guide. I knew the kinds of things that I was looking for because I had been asking the questions that were pre-written for me. So just like any job that, when you first learn to cook, you follow the recipe exactly as it's written. But then once you know how to cook, you can tweak it to personalize it. I don't like anchovies. I won't add it and it won't ruin the recipe or whatever. So part of it is just jumping in and getting your feet wet. You have to start and then you will figure things out as you go. I know it sounds so, we're on the backside of this. We're done. We're done homeschooling. I mean, Sunny's still homeschooling, but she's been doing it for a while. And so we're telling you this from experience of having done it and been there. And many of my friends have done the same thing. So it's not just me or just Lisa. There's, everyone will figure things out. The other thing too, I believe it's important to have community because we're created for community. The Lord made us to need one another. And so when I am in community with other homeschoolers and my child is struggling, well, I don't know if he's struggling. This is normal to me because this is my child and this is what he does. And then I find out from my friends, oh no, their kids are ahead in reading. Maybe we do have something going on here. Maybe it's not me. For years I thought I just can't teach a kid to read. Oh no, my child was dyslexic and so once I learned about things that are out there or different things that people do or whatever, it helped me understand what I needed to do. It wasn't me. I needed to get my child evaluated. There are other things that we could do to help him, etc. So I would say those would be the two things. Start with a curriculum that you trust and that you can tweak from. And then the other thing is be in some sort of homeschool community. And if you live in a remote place, we have an online community available to you. Our Sonlight Connections app is a place where other Sonlighters hang out and you can ask questions and see what other people are doing and gain wisdom from them. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. It does sound a little like it's hard to understand if you haven't been there, if you're starting out, when we say you will know, but you will kind of know. You will learn what's normal for your child, what things they excel at and what they don't. I would caution you, don't compare them to each other. Don't compare them to you or your spouse. They might share similarities, but they're not going to be the same. And so I think early on, like I expected that my kids would learn the way I did. They would think the way I did, and I learned that they're their own unique individual people. Imagine that, right? And so I had to learn like, okay, that might have worked for me as a student, but what's going to work for this child as the student. And I kind of touched on it earlier, like behaviorally, you'll start to tell, like my son, especially when he was very young, would start acting out if something was hard. And if he started acting kind of wiggly, like fighting me a little bit on things, it took me too long to realize it wasn't that he was trying to misbehave or disobey. It was that he did not understand what I was asking him to do, but he didn't have the words yet to tell me that. And so now that he's almost 11, he'll say, oh, this is hard. Like he knows now to say those things to me. But early on, he would just act out and cry. And I was like, okay, what's going on? And like Lisa said, get to the heart of it. Is this child being defiant because, oh, now they're in middle school or high school and they want to test the boundaries a little bit? Or are they acting out because they don't understand what you're asking them to do and they need help with that? So pay attention to what your child is doing and be willing to flex with it. Don't feel like you have to meet a certain standard just because someone else is. And like Sheila said, get in the community and find out from other people, because you might be wondering, I have that question a lot, like, is this normal for a child at age 7 to do these things, to learn like this, to not be able to do this? And in the Sonlight Connections community, in our app, you're able to hear from other parents that are using the exact same books you are, that have kids the exact same age. And so you can get a good gauge for, okay, what is normal for this age range, or what should be evaluated, right? Like maybe my child isn't doing things that everyone else can do at that age. I will say for reading, it is a wide range. I had one child that read at 4 and one that read at 8. And so they both now read well. You cannot tell when they learn to read as adults. I don't think anyone is ever going to say, how old were you when you learned how to read? So much like these ladies have said, once you're past those hurdles, you can look back and say, oh yeah, it was totally fine. So if we can encourage any of you that are in that situation where you're wondering, is it going to work out okay? We have gotten through all those hurdles. And so we can tell you, yes, it will. You will teach them what they need to know. And at the very least, you will teach them how to find out what they need to know. Like Lisa referenced earlier, they can go look up all the information they want. I always tell my kids, I'm like, one day you are going to know so much more in this area than I ever could teach you. But right now, this is what I know. And so this is what I'm going to help you with. And I'm excited for the days when, they go off into their own career paths and decide what they want to do and know way more than I do. Thing I wanted to mention is that you at the home, as the homeschool parent, you are always learning through the journey as well. Don't feel like you need to come in knowing it all, knowing everything that you need to do to teach your kids. You have been their parent as long as they've been alive. You've already taught them so many things just by being their parent. So then homeschooling is just an extension of that. So like Sheila mentioned, your curriculum will help give you those guidelines, will help you teach your child how to read or teach them how to write or whatever the academic subject is. But just remember, you've taught them so many things and you're going to be teaching them so many life skills as they mature anyway. So just relax a little bit, take a deep breath. I know that's hard. I'm like the least relaxed person naturally ever, but well, my too as well. We're all kind of type A's. And so we've learned, though, through homeschooling to relax, that it is going to work out okay. We've learned to work with the students we have, and you will too. So just to encourage anyone who is thinking, oh, there's no way, there is a way. Also, pray about it. God will equip you to do the things he's called you to do. So do not sit there thinking you're all alone, because you are not. He is there with you. And if you join us in the Sonlight Connections app, we are there with you as well, even if you are not physically in the room with us. So if you have any questions as you're watching this, or just anytime throughout the year, post those in the app and we will respond to you. Drop them in the comments on the video. If you're watching this on YouTube, we do come back and review that. We would love to answer whatever questions you have. And you can always contact Sonlight. We are available to help you. We don't just want to give you curriculum. We do want to help you with your homeschool journey as well. So don't be a stranger and do not struggle alone with what's going on. Of course, if you have a local community as well, get involved there, because that will help you out through the years too. Ladies, before we wrap up, do you have any additional insights or encouragement you'd like to offer?
I loved what you said, that ultimately God is the source and the power of our homeschooling. And I don't think a lot of type B start homeschooling. I think some of us might morph from a strict type A into that, but that is the lesson that the Lord has. And maybe that's why you're homeschooling. Maybe it's for the Lord to teach you to loosen the grasp just a little bit. I'm not speaking from experience at all.
I would say enjoy the journey. It goes by so fast. Lisa and I are both done. And so, I mean, Lisa has grandkids. I don't have that yet, but it just goes by so fast. And I remember when Lisa first started homeschooling. So I remember when I first started homeschooling, and it felt like it was going to take forever. And it doesn't. My nephew graduates this year. And I remember when he was born and we were homeschooling and we would watch him so his mom could go to work, and then she ended up staying home. So I know strangers on the street stop and tell you enjoy it, when your child is melting down and, driving you crazy. But when you're having a good day, savor it, like take a mental snapshot so you can go back.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with both of you. Thank you so much for being here. If today was your first day tuning in, go back and watch yesterday's session. And we would love to see you all back again tomorrow for day 3. So we'll keep working through the process and helping you answer those homeschool questions. But keep joining us, keep asking for help. We would love to help you out. And Lisa, Sheila, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
Of course.